They're dealing with another version of themselves. Both of them know they can't be trusted. Oh
This
my god, they really got into power because of foreign interference. I do not remember any of them mentions Russians. I think I might have just discovered another blind spot.
So here's Lev Kahan. He was a deputy foreign minister. In 1919, he sends a missive, his Kahan Manifesto, to the Chinese foreign ministry, and he says, "Hey, we're not imperialists, we're Bolsheviks. We're going to return all the lands from those unequal treaties and be your friend from evermore. Unlike all the other evil imperialist powers, we're not like that anymore." And so the Chinese are looking at this and thinking, wow.
This narrative is very familiar to me because growing up, I heard it constantly. The Chinese Communist Party is anti imperialist, and that is supposed to make them automatically a good party. And I'm seeing that more and more, the same sentiment echoed more and more in the West, especially from people on the left, that imperialism was evil. It was. But it doesn't mean anyone who claims to be anti imperialist must be on the right side of history. And I think there's a certain level of hypocrisy when the Communist Party, Russian or Chinese, when they claim to be anti imperialist, what they offered was not that much better. It was not even that much different. If you look at the communist regime, they're all top down, they're tyrannical, they're impersonal, they have very little regard for human dignity. A lot of the things that make an imperialist regime bad exist in communist regimes too. Looking back, maybe that's why Chinese people accepted communism. It's a little familiar. And who doesn't want something that's a little familiar, I guess?
Here are the Bolsheviks who've gotten rid of their imperialistic government. They're putting together their shattered land. And so this offers hope to the Chinese that they can do likewise. And it's a model potentially to follow and a mentor who might help them. Except here's the detail. When the Bolsheviks started doing better in their civil war, they really dialed back what their offer was. The original offer was tear up treaties, China gets all territory back, no payments necessary. Under the new version of the Kahan Manifesto, which the Russian Foreign Ministry goes and telegraphs to the Chinese Foreign Ministry. I've seen the document, or at least a certain copy of it in the archives in Taiwan. They send it back and say, we're willing to talk about these things. We're going to hold some negotiations. The facts are they didn't return these concession areas to the mid 20th century, 1950s, after the Westerners had returned almost all of their concession areas.
Of course, they broke their promises. As someone who grew up in China, I think a lot of the times I look at Russia, I feel like I'm looking at my own country. A lot of people were shocked when Russia invaded Ukraine, or that when Xi Jinping, the Chinese Communist Party, took over Hong Kong earlier than it promised. It really shouldn't be a surprise if you really understand, the history of the two countries. I think it's almost like a little arrogant when you're trying to project your democratic values just automatically on these countries. And because Russia and China are so similar, I think that's what makes this relationship so interesting because if China was dealing with a Western democracy, they might not understand China as well as Russia, which means maybe there are tricks that China could pull out and they won't see it coming, but they're dealing with another version of themselves. Both of them know they can't be trusted. Everything that China does, Russia can do them too. Like they're very similar. They know each other's playbook. They know each other too well, and it makes this whole relationship a little awkward. They're like competitors, not necessarily enemies, but I think they're opportunistic competitors, I guess.
This is not trivial. And when we think of concession areas in the age of imperialism in China, you think of British ones, right? Hong Kong. Hong Kong isn't actually very big. The reason you know about Hong Kong is it makes lots of money, or at least it used to. And the Russian concession areas were huge, didn't make money. Nothing. What else is new? But the Russians had by far the largest concession area of any other country. But from the Kahan Manifesto is the origin of the myth of Sino-Soviet friendship, that the Russians somehow treated the Chinese nicely. And the foreign ministry officials who have known better, their government is overthrown within the decade, and presumably these documents just gather dust in the archives.
The fact that Russia took so much of our territory is actually a surprise for a lot of Chinese people. I know I've said this a lot in my past videos, but it really bears repeating. I remember about a year ago in our little Chinese dissident circle online, there was a video that went viral on Chinese internet. It was a Chinese netizen asking AI, presumably DeepSeek. She was asking who took the most land from China. And obviously, she was born and raised in China and she speaks Chinese. And she was expecting something very different. She was expecting Japan and the US because that's who she was taught to hate. And they are the enemy, right? But then the AI shot back with, it's Russia. And so, like, she was like very shocked, you know. It's such a shocking thing for them. They couldn't believe it. If you're in the US or Canada and there's another country in your history that took a lot of land from you, like in fact, they took the most land from you compared to all the other invaders, you think that should be included in the textbook, that should be emphasized if you really think these kind of things are important. But in China, things are very different. I only learned parts of the truth of my own history years after I became an adult. I don't know, learning about this is it's enlightening, but it's also makes me a little sad because I lived in the lie, I guess, for years. And I know there are a lot of people who still are in that big, huge lie. And I think that's very sad.
All right, my fourth example of derailing China's rise concerns the first united front between the Chinese Nationalist and Chinese Communist Party. Here's the leader of the Nationalist Party and also leader of its armies, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. He led the Northern Expedition, reunifying China, at least nominally, by either.
So, just a quick note, he is the nationalist leader that everybody knows. Probably not because of the history book, because I guess the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want its population to know too much about him. It's actually through TV shows. Growing up, there is a specific genre, it's called 抗日剧. That's like anti-Japan TV drama. It's almost comical to watch, but like it's a brainwashing TV show that is presented to kids, everybody in China, adults, at the prime, television time. Every single month, every single day, I'd say. And that's not even an exaggeration. You turn on TV and there's some sort of anti-Japan drama going on. And it tells a singular story because all of the stories have to be approved by the Chinese Communist Party before they go on television, right? The story is how the Chinese Communist Party fought the war. And this nationalist leader is supposed to be an asshole. It's basically the theme of every single one of them. It's just every single Chinese knows about him. And nobody likes him. Everybody is supposed to hate him. Yeah.
Feeding or co-opting all those warlords there. You can see different colors of where the major warlords were. And previous South China attempts to do this or to secede from China, one or the other, had failed for lack of a proficient military. But Russia changes that. It provides aid, arms, and expertise and structures and things to found the Huangpoa Military Academy, which is in Canton or Guangzhou. And that institution is going to educate the officers.
Okay, I take that back. Like I thought okay, so I'm pretty sure what she said is Huangpu Junxiao, and that is the military school. It's like West Point in China kind of thing. All these years in these hundreds of like anti-Japan shows, I do not remember any of the mentions Russians. I think I might have just discovered another blind spot. I did not know that this cornerstone military school was founded with the help of Russians. And I think I'm going to take a guess. I think I know why. When you live in an authoritarian regime, your worldview is you versus foreigners. The Chinese Communist Party has always prided themselves for building something domestically. Every time when there's something bad happens, they always blame the foreigners. We call them 境外势力. It basically just translates to power or entity that is not from China. The irony here is that they were able to change their fate and insert themselves into the central power struggle because of a foreign power. So, by their own logic, They're the culprit of working with a foreign power. Oh God, I wish I could explain this better because for every single Chinese, if you were born and raised in China, 境外势力 is such a familiar word. You don't air your dirty laundry in front of them.
Both communists and nationalists who would lead not only this, but some of their Civil War era officers that make this reunification of China possible. But the Russians had a price. Give the nationalists the aid, but the nationalists then have to let the communists into the Nationalist Party. That's what the United Front is. So
Oh
this
my God, they really got into power because of foreign interference. If this happened today, if there's a second party that preaches democracy or whatever, China would point the finger at them and be like, they're bad people. They're not one of us. Not one of us is what they would say. But like, oh God, the irony.
all coincides with a bitter succession struggle in Russia. This is the problem with dictatorships. They really don't do succession well. It's why elections are so convenient. Instead, you have Stalin and Trotsky going at it of which one was going to be the big cheese. Stalin is all about socialism in one country. He thinks that Russia ought to focus on its own internal development, whereas Trotsky says nonsense. We need to focus on world revolution because only if there are sister revolutions abroad can ours survive.